the unveiling of Letitia Barbauld's plaque. And first of all, I'd like to thank Steve Clare Langan for giving us the opportunity to put this plaque on their property. Obviously, we've had to apply for planning permission, etc., with their full consent. First of all, welcome to the important guests. All the way from the United States of America, we have Professor Willaim McCarthy, who's travelled over especially for this event. Professor Emeritus Iowa State University has travelled from USA for this unveiling. Bill is a freelance writer, editor and literary researcher. He wrote the Letitia Barbauld, Voice of Enlightenment 2008, and was co-editor of selected poetry and prose of Letitia Barbauld and the poems of Letitia Barbauld, both with Elizabeth Craft. We also have here, all the way from London, Dr. Naomi Lightman, who teaches at Birkbeck College, London University. She has lectured on Barbauld for the National Portrait Gallery, London, and KiT's House, Hampstead, and has broadcast 2 features of Barbauld for the BBC, as well as appearing in the Story of England episode that featured Barbauld. Unveiling the plaque is Sir Edward Garnier, QCMP for the Harborough, Oadby and Wigston constituency since 1992. Edward is a barrister and Conservative politician, and he served as a Solicitor General for the England and Wales from 2010 to last year. All the way back to Kibworth is someone who I've seen more in the last 4 years than I have most of my family, is Michael Wood. So welcome back, Michael, with Rebecca. We also have here Dr. Felicity James, a lecturer in the 18th and 19th century literature from Leicester University. We have Catriona Broderick, a direct descendant of John Aitken, Simon Martin, a direct descendant of John Aitken, Ken Jack, son of Brigadier General Jack, who lived in the old house. The road to today's ceremony, Michael Wood, the Story of England BBC TV series. Without the Story of England, I'm quite sure that the lottery grant that the Kibworth Improvement Team received wouldn't have been so easy to achieve. Michael has definitely put Kibworth on the map, and I'm sure that we within the Kibworth Improvement Team have capitalised on that to the best of our abilities. The Kibworth Improvement Team is a community partnership formed to improve the health and well-being of Kibworth, Kibworth Beecham, Kibworth Harcourt and Smeaton Westby, residents and business and visitors. The Heritage Lottery Fund that we was granted was to the sum of £48,200 in 2010. The KiT project's Heritage Project is the Kibworth Guide booklet and the Betty's Heritage Trails, interpretation panels and blue plaques, school study materials and the online virtual museum which we are currently working on. The blue heritage plaques so far are the ones from Sir Nicholas Harold Lloyd Ridley on 70 Leicester Road, who was an ophthalmic surgeon who invented the intraocular lens to help patients with cataracts. The second one was Dr. Philip Doddridge on the White House, Leicester Road, who is a non-conformist minister, author, educator and renowned hymn writer. I have today got a copy of we've only got 2 of these. These will be printed next week, 10,000 off, and this includes now a page on all of the 3 plaques and also a large pull-out map of the whole village. So those will be available in the forthcoming months. If I could turn around and ask Michael Wood to come to the front and please say a few words. Give him a round of applause, please.
Yeah, great. Can you hear me at the back? Is that okay? It's a really great pleasure to be back. I must say,
A bit closer with the mic.
the experience of making these films was a really joyous one, and Rebecca had produced the series and directed it, and I just loved our trips up. We felt quite nostalgic today as the train zoomed up to Market Harborough and that familiar landscape opened up with the woods of Gumley over to the left. It's a great pleasure to be here, and we're glad to have played a small part in this continuing story today. I was very, very touched that you should do this for Anna Letitia Barbauld. Of course, the great work has been done by Bill, and you'll hear from Bill in a moment or two. Felicity has done wonderful things. A fascinating volume of essays just come out. The bandwagon is rolling, if you like. What laid behind this is a hidden history. It's women's history and it's people's history, and it's what was happening in the regions and the localities, not at the centre. And it's a truly wonderful story about the development of our culture in the 18th century, I think. So this plaque today stands for more than just the Kibworth story, although of course it's a wonderful part of the Kibworth story. She left here, well, Bill will tell you much more about this than I ever could, but she left here I think when she was 15. Her early years are part of a much older story, which is what fascinated us in our films. The story of non-conformity, in the broadest sense, goes deep into the past here in Kibworth. Even before the English Civil War, it's clearly a big story. The world and this village thinking for themselves and debating about conscience going right back into the 1300s. A truly vast amount of material being unearthed now out of the Merton documents. So it's a really extraordinary tale of continuity and of life lived, and the story of how the local story can be seen through the national, and the national story through the local. And it was a really great pleasure to be involved in this. Wherever we go, people still talk about the Kibworth story. I never quite thought that, people up in the north of Scotland or in Northern Ireland would have engaged with it so much, but we were filming last year in Elgin in the north of Scotland, and a craggy Scotsman came over to us in the middle of Elgin. I thought he was annoyed that a film crew was standing there. He said, "I really like Kibworth. Great bunch of people." And we get the same response everywhere. I think people really identified with it. And the wonderful thing about Anna Letitia Barbauld's story is it doesn't come out of the blue. It's part of the fibre of the life of this place. And of course, she goes on to extraordinary stories, which other people can talk about. But I've said enough, really. It's a great pleasure to be here. There are more local heroes to come, I hope. John Loveday. What about Loveday, the great 19th century politician, builder, socialist? Nellie Taylor, the suffragette. What about those great Lollards who died for the cause back in the 1380s and 90s and 1400s? It's an amazing tale, this one place. When we started it, we could have never guessed so many wonderful things would come out of it. So thanks ever so, and let's hand over to the other.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is the introduction to Mrs. Barbauld's Lessons for Children, and I think describes her motivation behind writing stories for children. This little publication was made for a particular child, but the public is welcome to the use of it. It was found that, amidst the multitude of books professedly written for children, there is not one adapted to the comprehension of a child from 2 to 3 years old. A grave remark or a connected story, however simple, is above his capacity, and nonsense is always below it. For folly is worse than ignorance. Another great defect is the want of good paper, a clear and large type and large spaces. They only who have actually taught young children can be sensible how necessary these assistances are. The eye of a child and of a learner cannot catch, as ours can, a small, obscure, ill-formed word amidst a number of others, all equally unknown to him. To supply these deficiencies is the object of this book. The task is humble, but not mean, for to lay the first stone of a noble building and to plant the first idea in a human mind can be no dishonour to any hand. And this And this is a short example of one of the stories included in the book. It is May, oh pleasant May, let us walk out in the fields. The hawthorn is in blossom, let us go and get some out of the hedges. And here are daisies and cowslips and crowflowers. We will make a nosegay. Here is a bit of thread to tie it with. Smell, it is very sweet. What has Billy got? He has got a nest of young birds. He has been climbing a high tree for them. Poor little birds, they have no feathers. Keep them warm. You must feed them with a quill. You must give them bread and milk.
I am not good. Can you hear me? Am I audible? Yes. I am not good at improvised remarks, so with apologies, I will read some. We are here today to discharge a long-standing debt. In this house, in the years 1743 and 47, were born two people who changed the course of English literature and English education. Letitia Aiken, who published mostly under her married name, Barbauld, and her brother, John. Letitia could be called England's first woman of letters, something like the Virginia Woolf of her time. She was famous as a poet, an essayist, a writer for children, whence she has been called the J.K. Rowling of her time, a political writer, an editor, a commentator on poetry and fiction. Her lessons for children and her hymns in prose for children revolutionized the teaching of reading and religion internationally, here in England and in the United States. Her brother, John, trained as a doctor but moved over into literature. He published on many subjects, but was perhaps most influential as the editor of a leading magazine in the 1790s and a multi-volume biographical dictionary, a predecessor of the DNB. He and she collaborated sometimes. Their most popular joint work was a collection of tales and dialogues for young readers, Evenings at Home. Letitia and John were one generation older than the writers who are known today as the first of the great Romantics, William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge. They knew Wordsworth and helped Coleridge get started. Letitia was among the first to recognize Coleridge's genius, and John was among the first to publish his poems. Walter Scott also avowed that he owed to Letitia his inspiration in poetry, so between them, Letitia and John played midwife to British Romanticism. It was a chance encounter with her political pamphlets, works of great ethical power, that introduced me to Letitia's writing 30 years ago. At that time, around 1983, her and John's names had been almost entirely forgotten for decades. Literary history, like most history really, has a way of thrusting some names forward into fame and thrusting others back out of it. Literary history promotes and demotes for reasons of fashion and prejudice that have often no relation to the real worth of the names that are moved up or down. And so it came about that the birthplace of Letitia and John Aiken was forgotten. Kibworth knew them not. That we now know this house to be their birthplace as a result of a series of investigations, first by Peter Burfoot, resident and restorer of the old house in the early 1990s, and afterwards of research in 2001 in which I and Simon Martin were greatly aided by Dr. Christine Viles, late historian and resident of Kibworth Beecham. I wish she could have been here today. For designing and mounting the plaque that will henceforth identify the house on behalf of all who admire Letitia and John Aiken, I wish to thank David Adams and the Kibworth Improvement Team and Steve and Clare Langan, through whose kindness and historical interest we are welcomed here today. Letitia was a strong and wonderful poet in her own right. The poem of hers that I first encountered and fell in love with is titled Washing Day. Both humorously and seriously, it recalls and records scenes from Letitia's childhood in this house. So that you may hear Anna Letitia's voice for yourselves, Naomi Lightman will read a passage from it. You may recall Dr. Lightman from her appearance in Michael Wood's television series, The Story of England. We are honored by the presence of both of them for this occasion. You're on.
Do you mind holding it? Both hands. Yes, thank you. I well remember when a child the awe this day struck into me. For then the maids, I scarce knew why, looked cross and drove me from them. Nor soft caress could I obtain, nor hope usual indulgences, jellies or creams, relic of costly suppers, and set by for me their petted one, or buttered toast when butter was forbid, or thrilling tale of ghost or witch or murder. So I went and sheltered me beside the parlour fire. There my dear grandmother, eldest of forms, tended the little ones and watched from harm, anxiously fond, though oft her spectacles with elfin cunning hid, and oft the pins drawn from her ravelled stocking might have soured one less indulgent. At intervals my mother's voice was heard, urging dispatch. Briskly the work went on, all hands employed to wash, to rinse, to wring, to fold, and starch, and clap, and iron, and plait. Then would I sit me down and ponder much why washings were. Sometimes through hollow bowl of pipe amused we blew and sent aloft the floating bubbles, little dreaming then to see, Montgolfier, thy silken ball ride buoyant through the clouds, so near approach the sports of children and the toils of men. Earth, air, and sky, and ocean hath its bubbles, and verse is one of them, this most of all.
Thank you very much.
I saw on the dining room table one of her poems, Domestic News, and there's a line in it, or at least part of the line, where she talks of the slipshod, loose-tongued prattling going on in the kitchen, but I have a suspicion she may perhaps have had the future Member of Parliament for Kibworth in mind when she was composing those lines. I want, if I may, and very briefly given the weather, I had planned a Ceausescu-length speech, which I knew you'd all enjoy. I want, very briefly, if I may, first of all, to thank Clare and Steve Langan very much indeed for allowing us to put up this plaque and to commemorate a wonderful local person. I think, Michael, you'd agree that you don't have to dig very deep in England, but you certainly don't have to dig very deep in Kibworth to find people and facts of huge contemporary but historical interest. And I want to thank Michael and your team and Rebecca very much for all that you did to bring Kibworth alive to not just this local audience but to a world, so that Kibworth is now a place that people know about from New Zealand to America, and thanks to American academics, its literary exports are also much more widely known, and I'm deeply proud to be the Member of Parliament for a place which produces such gems. I want also, if I may, Andrew, to thank the KiT for all the work that they have done to help keep and put Kibworth on the map. Without the work of the KiT, so much of this would have gone unnoticed and unsung, and I think it's a real piece of genuine local community effort and spirit which has driven this, and I want to thank you very much indeed for that. And I know there are lots of you here who have played your part in all of this work, and if I were Ceausescu, I would of course list you all, but by the time I'd finished, you'll all have got double pneumonia. In St Mary's, Stoke Newington, where Anne Letitia Barbauld is buried, her memorial plate says this, and I won't read it all out. Endowed by the giver of all good, with wit, genius, poetic talent, and a vigorous understanding, she employed these high gifts in promoting the cause of humanity, peace, and justice, of civil and religious liberty, of pure, ardent, and affectionate devotion. Let the young, nurtured by her writings in the pure spirit of Christian morality, let those of maturer years, capable of appreciating the acuteness, the brilliant fancy, and sound reasoning of her literary compositions, let the surviving few who shared her delightful and instructive conversation bear witness to this monument, bear witness that this monument records no exaggerated praise. I think that's rather a touching memorial to clearly a most amazing woman, doing things which were, I think, unusual even in the age of Mary Wollstonecraft for a woman to do. And I think Kibworth should be proud that she came from here. Whether you are local or whether you are not local, that you will use this plaque and remember her and bid her good morning. There you go. There we go.
Yeah, and if I just ask for Steve would like to say a couple of words.
This is definitely the last words of the day. Somebody once said that history is a series of punctuation marks, and I think today is a very important punctuation mark in the history of this old house. And so I'd like to welcome everyone in who wants to come in, have a look around, come in for a drink, come in for a sandwich, and hopefully we'll see you all in there in a moment. Thank you.
If you give me your email address, I will send you a copy of this.